It started with a 911 call that lasted less than 60 seconds. The caller didn't witness a crime. No broken glass, no screams, no alarms, just a black couple sitting in a black SUV outside a high-end home with a for sale sign. That was all it took. The woman's voice on the line said, "They don't look like they belong here. They're circling. I think they're scoping houses." By the time the dispatcher asked for more detail, 4 patrol cars had already been dispatched. Possible burglary in progress. Suspects in a dark SUV. Black male. Black female. Mid-30s. At 9:47 p.m., in the kind of neighborhood where landscapers come on schedule and mailboxes match the trim. Sirens sliced through the silence. The SUV parked legally. Engine off was instantly surrounded. High beams on. Flashlights out. A megaphone blared. "Hands up. Step out slowly." Inside the vehicle, Nia Watson didn't blink. She closed the FBI files on her lap, set her tablet face down on the passenger seat, and said calmly, "Well, here we go." Elijah Harris, beside her, was reading DOJ surveillance notes. He looked up. No panic, just the same exhale he'd given 100 times in courtrooms and briefings. "Stay cool," he muttered. "We're being profiled. Not arrested yet." Neither of them reached for their IDs. They knew better. In situations like this, your job title didn't count. Your color did. Nia slowly opened her door, hands visible. Immediately, a young officer screamed, "Get down on your knees." Now his voice cracked like he wasn't used to confrontation, at least not with people who didn't flinch. She followed instructions with precision, not submission. Elijah stayed put in the passenger seat, hands on the dash, hoodie sleeves rolled to the elbow. The red and blue lights flickered across his face, and for a moment, he looked like every statistic the system feared. "This vehicle matches a description from a break-in last week," one officer claimed, though there had been no such report. "Do you have proof of ownership?" That was the moment Elijah tapped a button hidden beneath the steering wheel. Instantly, the vehicle's onboard security system began broadcasting live to the DOJ's internal accountability server. No alarms, no declarations, just data streaming in real time to people who knew exactly who he was. Meanwhile, Nia kept her voice even. "We're not resisting. You're escalating, and you're being recorded," one officer replied. "Good. We'll see how this goes when your story doesn't check out." The silence that followed wasn't peaceful. It was packed with assumptions, tension, and the weight of a uniform facing its own reflection and not recognizing it. They didn't know who she was. They didn't know who he was. But they were about to find out. Nia Watson wasn't just an FBI agent. She was the kind of agent who got called in when other agents failed. She didn't wear her badge around her neck. She didn't flash credentials in line at airports. Her work spoke for itself in closed-door debriefings, in hand-delivered files, stamped confidential, and in quiet rescues that never made the news. Her record was clean, her instincts sharper than most. But none of that mattered now. Not when she was kneeling on pavement in a neighborhood where her presence was treated like a warning sign. Not a right. Elijah Harris had spent years auditing law enforcement practices, tracking civil rights violations across departments. He had personally authored internal reviews that helped reform stop-and-frisk protocols in 5 states. His work had been cited before Congress. He'd trained officers on implicit bias, some of the very ones who would have drawn their weapons on him tonight, just like these did now. Yet at this moment, none of his accolades, none of his clearance levels, could speak louder than the hoodie he wore or the suspicion in their eyes. Inside the car, a silent camera in the rearview mirror recorded every second. That wasn't just for security, it was DOJ issued, linked to Elijah's secure line. The stream didn't just save to a cloud. It went directly to federal review. But Elijah didn't rush to reveal it. He wanted the footage complete, unedited, unprovoked. He wanted the system to see itself without filters. The officers didn't ask for ID. They didn't check the registration. One of them knocked on the hood and said to his partner, loud enough for the mic to catch Bet, "They say they're just waiting for someone. That's the go-to lie." Another officer laughed and began walking to the trunk. "Check it. Could be stolen goods." Nia's jaw tightened, but she said nothing. Her silence wasn't fear, it was calculation. She needed them to say more, to go further, because that's how you exposed rot. Not by flinching, but by letting it speak for itself. Elijah finally spoke, his voice even. "We're on federal business. We're not authorized to share details with local enforcement." The lead officer scoffed. "Federal? You're kidding me, right? What are you? Secret Service?" Elijah met his gaze. "No, higher clearance than that." They didn't believe him. But that was fine, because believing wasn't a requirement for accountability. The truth was already uploading, and justice, for once, was patient. One officer moved to open the back door of the SUV without consent. "We've had a lot of thefts lately," he muttered, as if that justified everything. Elijah didn't flinch. He simply said, "That's a Fourth Amendment violation, and it's on record." The officer paused for half a second, then kept going. His partner added, "You two really thought you could pull this off in a place like this?" That line so casual, so full of coded contempt hung in the air like smoke. Nia stood now, her hands still visible, her body steady. She had trained to maintain composure under fire, but this wasn't a mission. It was a mirror. These weren't enemies, they were colleagues in uniform, exposing the rot from the inside out. She said, quietly but clearly, "I'm documenting every move you make." The officer closest to her snapped, "Good. Maybe your TikTok followers will love it." Behind her, the backup units arrived. More flashlights, more boots on pavement. None of them knew they were being watched from much higher up. Elijah stayed silent. His mind wasn't racing, it was organizing. Every phrase, every gesture, every infraction was being logged. He remembered his father's story, how in 1987 he'd been pulled from his car, beaten, and left with broken ribs because he fit a description. Elijah wasn't going to run. He wasn't going to yell. He was going to prosecute with truth so cold it would burn later. One of the younger officers squinted at Elijah and whispered to his colleague, "I swear I've seen this guy before." The other shrugged. Maybe he's one of those Instagram lawyers. That was the moment the command center caught up. A digital alert pinged across the precinct server. "Stop all contact. Subject in vehicle confirmed as federal clearance, DOJ active. Secondary passenger FBI active." And no one at the scene got that message yet. But up the chain, people were moving. Fast. In a matter of minutes, the reality of what they'd done would hit. And when it did, no excuse would be big enough to bury it. The law doesn't care how loud you talk or how fast you draw. It remembers how you behave when you think no one's watching. And tonight, someone was. As the tension simmered on that quiet street, a sleek, unmarked black SUV rolled silently into view. It didn't belong to the neighborhood, but it didn't need to. The moment it pulled to a stop, its presence shifted the entire atmosphere. Doors opened, and two agents in plain suits stepped out, earpieces in, eyes sharp, walking with the calm urgency of people who weren't there to ask permission. One of them approached the closest officer and leaned in. The conversation was short, tight, and one-sided. Whatever was said caused the officer's face to drain of color. Within seconds, the tone shifted. Officers who had been barking orders were suddenly stepping back, radios buzzing with rapid chatter. No apologies, no explanations, just quiet retreat, masked as procedure. Naya and Elijah remained still, their expressions unreadable. But their eyes told the story, not of fear, not even of anger. Just the cold recognition that tonight was never about suspicion. It was about control. The commanding officer stepped forward, now clearly aware of the mistake. "We, may have had some confusion regarding your vehicle," he began. Elijah interrupted him. "You didn't check the plate. You didn't ask for ID. You assumed based on race, not reason." The officer's lips parted, but nothing came out. What could he say? That they looked out of place in a zip code full of manicured lawns and $5,000 grills. The federal agents didn't wait. They handed over a sealed folder to the precinct supervisor, nodded at Elijah and Naya, and got back into their vehicle. No fanfare, no dramatic lines, just quiet efficiency. That's how accountability enters a scene when it's been watching from the start. The remaining officers began to disperse, more confused than educated, their power shaken not by threats, but by the realization that they had cornered the very people trained to corner them. Elijah finally stepped back into the SUV, closing the door with the precision of a man used to ending things with dignity. Naya followed, brushing dirt from her pants without a word. As they pulled away, the only sound was the soft click of the dash cam ending its live stream. No one cheered, no one clapped, but justice had already taken notes. Back at their apartment, Elijah uploaded the full footage to DOJ's internal misconduct database. Naya filed her report with the FBI's Office of Professional Responsibility. No dramatic statements, no media press, just clean, surgical documentation of what had occurred start to finish. The video wasn't edited for effect. It didn't need music or narration. The raw footage was enough. Two respected federal officers, humiliated in their own country for the crime of driving while black in a zip code someone thought they didn't deserve. Neither of them pushed for public exposure. They didn't have to. The system they worked for began to churn the moment the footage was tagged priority review. Within 48 hours, the precinct's chief received an inquiry from federal oversight. Officer body cams were pulled. Dispatch audio was requested. The officers involved were asked to explain why no probable cause was cited, why no ID check was done before escalation, and why their tone suggested a predetermined guilt. 1 week later, Elijah was invited to speak at a closed-door Justice Department ethics summit. He didn't mention names. He didn't need to. He talked about silence, about how dignity isn't always loud, about how racism doesn't always yell, it whispers in protocols, hides in assumptions, and signs off on power unchecked. He ended with this: "I've spent years building systems of accountability, but this time, accountability met me in the street, and I let it see everything." The recording of that speech was shared internally across agencies. It leaked days later and went viral. Not because Elijah tried to go viral, but because truth doesn't need help catching fire. Comments flooded in. Agents, lawyers, students, even former officers wrote, "This happened to me too." Others said, "I never believed it until I saw it with my own eyes." The moment wasn't just personal. It became structural. It forced people to confront a truth they'd scrolled past too many times before. Nia didn't speak publicly. She didn't need a podium. Her silence was its own kind of roar. She just kept showing up to work, to briefings, to task forces. Every room she entered carried a new weight, because now they knew what it looked like when the system tried to swallow one of its own and failed. A month later, Nia and Elijah drove past that same quiet street, this time in a different car. Nothing tinted, nothing to hide. The house that had sparked the call now had a new sold sign, and the trimmed hedges looked the same. But the air felt different. Not because justice had been declared, not because anyone said sorry, but because the silence no longer held the same power. That silence had been pierced, documented, examined, and returned to the system that created it. They didn't stop. They didn't need to. A young boy on a bicycle noticed them as they rolled by, then squinted, eyes wide. He coasted up beside their car at a red light and asked, "Are you the people from the video?" Nia gave a small smile. Didn't answer right away. Elijah leaned slightly out the window and said, "We're people who didn't let fear shut us up." The boy nodded like he understood more than his age allowed. Then he said quietly, "They were wrong." "You didn't do anything," Elijah replied. "And that's why we showed the world." Later that week, Elijah was invited to speak to a class of first-year law students. When asked what the biggest lesson of his career had been, he didn't mention the DOJ, or the reports, or even that night. He just said, "Your title doesn't protect you, your work doesn't shield you, but your truth, if you carry it carefully, can expose what no badge ever will." The room went still. Nia never took the stage. She returned to her fieldwork, the kind where names don't get headlines, but lives get saved. The next time someone called the police on a suspicious black couple in a nice neighborhood, her face came to mind. The difference was, they hesitated. They hesitated because now they'd seen what it looked like when power wore a hoodie and walked with dignity, when silence was weaponized with facts, when being underestimated became a trigger for exposure. And that's how change starts, not always with a bang, but with a pause. A pause long enough to ask, what if we're wrong this time? And in that pause, justice breathes.